Charles.
Cool.
Right.
Thank you. Next. All right. So yeah, very quickly, this project, you probably heard about it. So conservation standards adoption, a change management strategy. So we're looking more on the people side of the adoption process. So we are developing guidance material and tools for key individuals like yourself that aim to improve conservation planning practices within your organization. So we all want our organizations to be effective. We all believe in the value of the conservation standards to improve conservation practices. And anyone can play a role in making this change happen, but it can be difficult to know where to start. And this is where this project comes into play. So here are the people that have contributed over the past year to this project. Next. Previous.
Oops, sorry.
So in the first year of the project, we learned that many organizations are eager to document and share their experience adopting the conservation standards. Many organizations would feel more confident doing this process if they had access to lessons from other organizations that have been on the same path before. So through this project, we're trying to create bridges between those organizations. So we have also learned that it's difficult to develop a clear roadmap that would apply to many different organizations that are at various levels of conservation standards adoption, given the history, context, and culture can be different for each. Next. So I'll give you a very quick introduction to the guidance materials and tools that we are developing. So we've created a variety project in Camel. So we're suggesting that people copy this project or the Word report created from it, populate it with content that is relevant to their own situation, and use it to track their progress, learn, adapt their approach. So we've developed a change management theory of change, which is meant to provide guidance that will be applicable no matter the organization and where you are in terms of maturity of adopting the conservation standards. And we also developed a capability maturity model based on Annette's work, which is meant to provide more specific guidance to improve specific practices from one level of maturity to another. We also collected case studies and integrated them into this Marathi project so that they all have similar format and it's easier to learn from them. Next.
And 2 minutes left. Okay.
Sorry, how many?
2 minutes left.
Oh, that's good. We've also launched the Conservation Standards Adoption Support Group. You've probably seen a couple of my emails. So we developed terms of reference for the group. We agreed with the CMP board or an advisory group of the board on the format and the next steps. We've sent invitations through the CCNet listserv. We posted the invitation on the CCNet website and also through LinkedIn. So we had our first meeting yesterday where we discussed how to structure the group so that we meet our goals. Next slide. All right, so yes, we also sent a call for participating organizations to test, validate, and promote the products that we developed as part of this project. We received 6 responses requesting more funds than are available. So we are going through the process of rating and prioritizing allocation of funds. So we are going to ask for input from the broader CCNet CMP community in the next year. We're also going to submit the how-to manual to the guidance review committee. And we're going to go through a process of promotion of our products by delivering trainings and developing promotion videos. So you can visit our workspace if you want to get involved. You can get in touch with me. You can fill this form. I'm not sure if we can post the link if you're interested in joining the Conservation Standards Adoption Support Group. And remember, the products that we develop will only be useful if we get your input. Next project. You can put your questions and comments on this slide. I guess we don't have time for. Do we have time for questions now, or?
No, I think they just got to go in writing in the slide deck. Is that correct? I think that's the intent, to put questions in the slide deck. There's a link to in the chat.
Yep.
Good.
Yeah. So if we run out of time for questions, we've at least got a space that they can be put into the slide deck, and then the presenter can respond directly in the slide deck so everybody can see, and then they can reach out individually if needed. It's helpful if you put your name in there for the questions so the presenters know how to contact you if needed.
Great. And with that, back to Charles again for presentation number 2.
Okay, so the second project is the Science-Based Target for Nature Partnership. So I'm just going to give you a brief introduction to the Science-Based Target Network before we start about the project. So the Science-Based Target Network is part of the Global Commons Alliance, which is a network of organizations, business, and governments that aim to positively transform the world's economic system to protect the global commons, nature, climate. So this is the question that partners are trying to answer through their guidance, methods, and tools that they are developing. So they're trying to tell companies what they can do to start aligning with science to ensure that you're doing your part for an equitable, net zero, nature positive future. Next slide. So these are the partners that are involved. As you can see, the organizations that are circled in red are organizations that are also partners of the Conservation Measures Partnership. So there's a handful of organizations that we have in common. Next slide. So they have released the first version of their guidance, which is the equivalent of the main conservation standards document back in September 2020, which gives a high-level overview of their approach. It describes what the steps need to be taken for companies to set science-based targets. The final release of their guidance and tools is scheduled for 2023, so the timing is great for us to collaborate. Next slide. So this is more specifically the project that CMP is involved with. So as you saw, many organizations are part of both the SBTN and the CMP, and the methods and the tools that we are developing serve a similar purpose, although for different target audiences. So the Science-Based Target Network being focused on corporations primarily, and in the near future, municipal governments, and the CMP being focused on NGOs and government agencies. Next slide. So the purpose of our project is to build relationships and mutual understanding between the SBTN and the CMP, use our common capacity to learn from each other. And we are trying to get the SBTN behind the principles and the practice outlined in the conservation standards. And if there opportunities arise, also promote the use of variety. Next slide. Our vision is that we build off and align each other so that we send a single unified message to non-governmental organizations, government agencies, funders, and private businesses in terms of best practices that we can apply to protect nature. Next slide.
2 minutes left.
Thank you. A couple of people have been involved, mostly in an advisory role. So thank you for all of those folks. Next slide. All right, so we received funding from CMP last year, halfway throughout the year, just to initiate the project. So in this first year, we focused on just creating awareness between our two partnerships. And in the second year of the project, the objectives are to further expand the partnership between our organizations and ensure that we develop efficiencies across our network and build off and align with each other. So we are actively participating to their consultation process. Not too long ago, I presented together with a member of this SBTN's team a case study during a CMP mini webinar. We have documented how the SBTN supports and delivers on global agenda goals and measures of effectiveness. We provided this report to 2 of CMP's working groups. We also created a science-based target project in CAML, so you can visit this project if you're interested in learning more. And we are currently mapping relationships between the SBTN and the CMP framework, which is the images that you see on the right. Next slide. Okay, so what's next? We're going to continue building the partnership. There's going to be more outreach to the Science-Based Target Network about the conservation standards and Marathi, trying to promote its use and its usefulness to their group and their effort. We're going to develop new guidance and training materials that are going to be targeting CMP and CCNet members. We're also documenting how the Marathi ecosystem can help support the SBTN. Great. So in terms of how you can help us, if you know someone working closely with the Science-Based Target Network, please send me an email. We're trying to find entry points so that we can, promote the good work that we're doing.
Sounds great. And thanks so much, Charles. Sorry to keep moving it along. That was awesome. And yeah, as a reminder, people who came in late, you can put comments in the slide deck that there's a link to in the chat. And next up, we have Adrian and Ash.
Hi, yeah, I can take it from here. I'm Ash Baker. I work for Foundations of Success. So we're supporting the diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative here at CMP. I think as many of you all know, this initiative has been going on for a few years, kind of at the inception was at the last in-person CMP meeting. So we've had since then several consultants working with us to explore integrating the principles of DEIJ into the conservation standards guidance, but also into the way that CMP operates. So our aim is to strengthen our effectiveness by providing tools and processes for the practitioners that we work with to address these important issues. This is our current active team. This is not the entire team, but myself, Adrian, and Paulina work on this quite a bit. But there are a lot of folks who have come in and out over the years working on this, and there's quite a long list of people who are interested in supporting us when we are able to have a bit more of a robust kind of monthly meeting going on, but this is kind of the main focus. So the relationship to the CMP plan on this results chain here, I think if you click next, yeah, in the short term, we're looking to develop new guidance and tools of how to integrate DEIJ elements into our work. But in the long term, if you click again, we're hoping to update the conservation standards with this work more explicitly. And that takes a little bit of time. We need to kind of get it right on our end first within CMP before we start trying to integrate it into the standards. So next slide, and then I think another click. So we're going to get there by, in the short term here, working on this collaborative learning space and joining folks together in this initiative to talk about some of these elements to DEIJ and incorporating them into the conservation standards. And right now, what we're working on, if you go to the next slide, is going to kind of help us get there, hopefully. We've got a scope of work out now, and we'll share that in a moment in the chat box as well for folks. But the products that we're working on for this year, we're hoping to have 3 CMP-wide webinars that are just kind of like the foundations of DEIJ and what they mean. That's funded by the Moore Foundation. Then we're looking for support for the next iteration of the CMP strategic plan. So again, making sure that we're incorporating DEIJ in the right places within CMP, and then making a plan for how to incorporate it into the standards themselves. And that support hopefully is going to include facilitation, guidance, and tools from that expert, and then also their expert review of our draft plan. So to get there, we have a scope of work out. The deadline is June 17th. We're going to work collaboratively with the consultant to refine CMP's approach to DEIJ.
2 minutes left.
So, Thank you. What's next for us? We're going to have some DEIJ webinars. We sent out a survey last year as part of our work to find out who was interested in sharing their experiences. So we do have a list of folks to reach out to, and we hope to do that soon. We'll continue to meet and get ourselves together and hopefully jumpstart the CMP Equity Committee again with hopefully the planning of these webinars in the next year. So how to get involved? You can reach out to me and Adrian. We would love to hear from you if you want to be more actively involved in the committee. And yeah, I think if you have exciting things to share from your organization that you're doing, we'd love to hear about them. We'd love to get these webinars up and going to hear more about how other organizations are doing this well. So that's it for us.
I'm ending a minute early, and I don't think there's enough time for an actual substantial question and answer. So if it's okay, I think we'll just go on to Claire and Nick, who are up next to talk about threats and actions.
Does that mean I get that extra minute?
I think we're reclaiming it back from a late start, sorry.
Alrighty. Hi everyone, my name is Claire Elton. In this initiative, we are aiming to update the standardized IUCN CMP threats and actions classification systems, and then hopefully publish and disseminate version 3. So currently this is our core team, but as you can see, there's lots of seats available at the virtual table. So if anyone's interested or would like to join us, please do. This initiative supports a major set of activities within CMP's strategic plan for goal 2, which is to enable cross-project learning. And there's an action specifically dedicated to promoting a framework for conservation. So as you all know, the core of any science is a common classification system. So these classification systems will help teams to understand, organize, compare, and share information across institutions and geographies. And the threats and actions classifications remain two of the most widely utilized and important CMP products. So practitioners are able to use them to describe the problems they are facing and the solutions they are using to address those challenges. So here's a little bit of history for you. Following some preliminary sort of independent efforts, IUCN and CMP came together to develop and publish the standard classifications that resulted in version 1 of the threats and actions classifications. This was in 2008. And then to incorporate sort of real world experiences and lessons learned from around the globe, CMP then updated these classifications in 2016 to produce version 2. And although these were developed with some involvement from IUCN, actually chose not to formally endorse this new version and instead made their own minor revisions to version 1. So there was a bit of divergence here. But in keeping with the spirit of adaptive management, the time is right now to potentially revisit these classifications and update them to incorporate lessons learned and new thinking. And if possible, we really want to do this in conjunction with IUCN so that we can get back to having one unified global classification system. Perfect, thanks. So our work plan looks something like this at the moment. We are establishing a team of experts and interested parties to review the existing versions and to discuss potential changes. We're also doing a bit of a literature review, both scientific and grey literature, to understand how the classifications have been used previously and what lessons have been learned during this process. So hopefully building on from some of the recent work that's been done in Canada by some teams in Canada and working alongside IUCN, other externals, and of course, all of you at CMP, we'd ideally like to finalize these revisions and then beta test them with key stakeholders.
Great, 2 minutes left.
Thanks. I probably won't need all 2. So feedback is then going to be incorporated into this final version 3, which we'll then need to disseminate to relevant audiences through webinars and hopefully a publication. And another really important component will be to describe the key changes and migration paths between the new and the previous versions. And last slide, please. Thanks. So finally, I'd just really like to encourage you and your colleagues to join our initiative committee. If you have a special interest in these classifications, I've created a little Google form, so I'll share that in the chat. And yeah, if you'd like to get in touch, please contact myself or Nick. We've got a sort of launch meeting scheduled for Monday next week, so you're all welcome to join. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks so much to Claire, and thanks to everybody for putting in all the work to pull these together and being so timely. It's really nice to see. So next up, we have Lillian on the spatial conservation standards. I don't see him. Is someone else see him here in the meeting?
He was here earlier.
Yeah, I definitely saw him earlier.
Oh, here he is. Hey, we can't hear you, Lilian. Nope. I see you, which is a start.
How about now? Can you hear me?
Perfect. Thank you so
Yes.
much.
Wonderful. Well, hello everyone. So I'm gonna present the where we are in our spatial conservation standards theme. Thanks to Becky, we got together some old members, some new ones, and and started to reflect how we can revise the discussions about the spatial standards. Obviously, spatial information geography is relevant to all of the work which we do. The way how it relates to our strategies and our CMP plan is it comes as a tool from the tool side, but it's also coming from capturing different applications and examples, how this information can be actionable. Next. And regarding the second goal, it is very much focused on improving conservation data standards, developing the systems and infrastructure which enable us to use these tools more effectively at scale. Next. It pretty much goes back to the question which we have been asking ourselves. We have the question of conceptual framework, asking how we can do better conservation. Often is done at a very site-specific scale, but then of course we have these questions of where and how we can bring how we can bring the spatial and conceptual together, how we can do conservation planning at scale. Next. So the status is that it has been a few years now how this committee tried to develop the standards. We made some progress over the years. We made a couple of presentations. We got together and presented at some major partners out there, Esri, Mapbox, Microsoft, Google, but we didn't push it. And we didn't push it forward or define some specific goals and refine some specific objectives based on some of these interactions. So we're proposing this group to kind of blow on this coals again and get the fire burning, hopefully. And we want to do that by having right now a discussion and a dialogue internally, how we can focus more specifically on some objectives. And one idea is to focus on the threats and actions and see if there is some synergies with another group working on redefining some of the strategies, some of the standards for the strategies. Next. So the questions, some of the challenges which we have is that the questions are quite broad, because geography and geospatial technology and tools are everywhere in the conservation standards process. We have many questions. So we have been discussing about questions such as, should we come out with standards regarding the spatial resolution, scale, and the source of spatial data? For example, the set2 maps, which are developed with the same thresholds, with the same indicator, but different data sources. The one on the left is from open source map, and the one on the right is using much more detailed data from Maxar. You can see that for some areas, like national parks, doesn't make a difference. But for many areas, this data, different sources and scale has a huge difference. So can we develop standards around this? Is it an opportunity to develop standards? Next.
You got a minute and a half. Sorry, I was slow.
Oh, that's fine. So if you look at the same map and overlay the actual footprint of the house densities of each house, you can see actually that, yes, in one hand, we see that the threat is where it intersects with conservation targets. But if you look at the density on where the threat is coming, it's nearby, outside of the conservation target footprint. Should we consider a buffer? Should we include a certain size of the buffer? So this is some of the questions which we also talked. Next. And finally, technology is evolving so fast that now we can not only map where the house is, or we can see what type of impact that house has. We can look at the size of the house. We can see that the type of the roof of that house. And we know that that is connected with socioeconomic indicators of poverty and many other variables, which are important variables in defining the threat. So how we as a conservation standards community take advantage and think spatially about these incredible data sources. Next. So basically, we want to reconstruct this committee, hopefully with more new ideas and more new people. We want to build on existing materials. We don't want to waste all that work. We really want to have a discussion that we're in the middle to prioritize. What should be our focus? What should be our goals and objectives? And once we define that, then of course, join and develop some specific standards if this is possible. So please, get in touch with Becky or me, and we would love to add you to this ongoing dialogue. That's it. Any questions? I don't think we have time, but
John might be frozen.
John might be frozen.
Yeah, it looks like John's.
My Zoom crashed and right in the middle, so I'm very sorry for that, but I'm back.
It's all good.
Sorry to have missed the end. So if you're all wrapped up, it looks like Caroline
Yes,
next to the lighter conservation standards. And sorry again, I'll
Okay.
try to reestablish my little timer. I think that's what caused the problem.
No worries. I will try to move quickly through this. Hi, everybody. I am just going to share a little bit about the work that a group of us have been doing on lighter conservation standards approaches. This is an effort that has been supported with some funding from CMP, and we're looking to develop, enhance, and present conservation standards materials in accessible formats and ways so that coaches and team leaders can determine when and how lighter approaches work. This is our team working on the content, but we also have included CMP and CCNet here because really we consider all of you part of this team too. You've weighed in at various points that reacted to materials and helped guide this process. So that's been really helpful. The way this relates to the CMP plan, it is part of CMP strategy to improve projects and programs, and specifically developing new tools and guidance and developing training materials. The way we set things up in this lighter CS cookbook, which is, by the way, a working draft, it's still in progress. We identified a bunch of common scenarios for teams trying to use the conservation standards. And then we, for each of those scenarios, we developed a recipe card. We use this cookbook analogy of what are the ingredients that you need in order to do, for example, full cycle basics. And then for each of those ingredients, we have a series of tip sheets that provide tips and different ways, different options for approaching that particular step or process. We also have a spreadsheet that lays out, it's kind of a chart, an orientation chart that also includes all the different scenarios, and then gives some suggestions on what we think are some of the most important steps to include as part of that scenario. And this is maybe just an important point to flag here is the intent is not to say that these other steps are not important. They're all important. And in the best thing is to go through all of these steps, but recognizing sometimes teams don't have the resources or the time to go through all steps at the beginning. We're kind of laying out the most important steps to do initially with the recommendation that they go back and look at other steps over time. We've had a lot of community input. We've did a survey to kind of help guide the products and the interest in the lighter CS approaches. And we also had some community consultations where we talked in more detail with participants about what sort of lighter CS tools would they like to see, what materials did they know of that were out there that we could look at. We piloted some initial versions at the CCNet rally and got some input there and refined our prototypes based on that. And then we had a webinar in February to also share where we landed at the end of the year. Our plan over the coming months, thanks, John, is to finish up those tip sheets and explore other ways of sharing the material. Right now they're in Google Slides. So we have to think about whether that's the best way or some other way to do it. We also want to build out more detailed resources. So if somebody wants to go from the tip sheets into more detail on how to do something like viability assessment, say, then they could consult this resource list. And we will have another community consultation probably sometime in October or so. And so if you'd like to get involved, we'd love to get your input. It could be through this community consultation. You could test the cookbook. We'll drop the link into the chat box, but it's also in this presentation. And suggest scenarios, ingredients, check out our workspace or contact me.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Caroline. And I think next we have Jacqueline and Justin up to talk about promotion of the standards.
Great. I'll start it off, and anyone from this team feel free to jump in. We are here from the Conservation Standards Promotion Initiative. So we're a group, as you can see, that works together monthly to promote the conservation standards. It's a very fun group. We just get to brainstorm how to kind of disseminate this guidance and get people more involved. So if you want to jump to the next one, you can see our team right here. A lot of great people, and like I said, it's a fun way to meet monthly. You can hop to the next one. So we're kind of involved on that outreach about the conservation standards, as I mentioned. And then in the next one, just kind of general support and building CMP's membership, getting people to know about the standards and CMP. So current kind of products that we're working on and some recent progress. Hopefully you all are aware that we recently launched a photo story contest. So if you've been involved in CMP or CCNet in the past, you've seen the case study competition, the global case study competition. And this year we spiced things up a little bit differently to get some of that great imagery we see across the globe and have people tell their conservation standards stories through photos and accompanying captions. So that's going to be going on. There's still time to apply. Right now we have the deadline set at mid-July. We are also working on some steps 1 through 5 videos. So they're currently in progress. Again, hopefully you all saw the series of testimonial videos that came out. There's people featured in some of those testimonial videos that are currently on the call. So we have similar videos that are coming out, but they'll have a focus on one of the 5 steps of the conservation standards and how an organization has kind of highlighted and used that step in their real world work. We're also working on some additional testimonial videos that are going to start being released on a rolling basis, as well as the final steps for a longer promotional video called the About Us video. And that's in the works to hopefully close to completion. If you want to hop to the next one. So what's next? And a lot of this will have some similarities. There's going to be a conservation standards and CMP booth and an About CMP talk at the NACCB conference in Reno in mid-July. So that's pretty exciting. And there's going to be a lot of different sessions regarding conservation planning. So we'll kind of weave throughout that. There are other organizations that are doing testimonial videos, as I mentioned, with Justin at Running Wild Media. He's absolutely amazing, and the videos have been just so creative and visually spectacular. So this is a kind of plug and a reminder to anyone on the call. If your organization or consultancy or whoever is using the conservation standards and you're interested in a testimonial video, please reach out to myself or Caroline or Justin. It's a pretty nominal fee. Justin is helping do these videos for about $400. They're 2 to 3 minutes long, and it's a great way for us to help promote your organization and the amazing work you've done, while also giving some examples of how the conservation standards are being used. Again, rolling out those steps 1 through 5 videos, and then by the fall, we'll wrap up the photo story contest and announce winners, hopefully at the CCNet rally in October. If not, we'll create a virtual awards. So if you want to get involved, please share that the contest is going on. Please apply yourselves. Don't think I'm too involved. I don't want to apply. My organization, is already interwoven. We want everyone to feel they can apply and share their stories and their photos. Reach out if you want a testimonial video, as I mentioned. And then if you ever have promotional ideas, please reach out to myself. Like I said, Ryan's on there as well. Hopefully you've met him, and Caroline. So that's all for me. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Just under 5 minutes. Thanks so much, Jacqueline. And Marcia's up next with Climate Smart Conservation Standards.
Thanks, John. So the Climate Smart Conservation folks, a few years ago, we developed some guidance for incorporating climate impacts into how we plan and manage and monitor and adapt, how we go through the whole CS cycle. And so the purpose of this initiative is really to promote learning among folks who have different levels of experience trying to incorporate climate into conservation work. So next slide. We took the all-inclusive perspective on or approach to this slide. So different members of this group have been involved in different steps in development of the guidance, in writing a journal article last year, and then also in the learning initiative that we had last year. So next slide. So the way that we relate to CMP's plan is under goal 1 of improving projects and programs. I think if you click again, there will be a little arrow. We contribute to the development and testing and improvement of new guidance and tools, as well as, if you click again, sharing good examples. So we want folks to be sharing their examples. And for goal 2, enabling cross-project learning, we are working to facilitate the flow of information across organizations, among folks who are trying to tackle climate change. So our upcoming work, if you can click a few times. So we have, essentially this year, there are a couple of things that we're going to be focusing on. And one is facilitating more learning sessions, giving people more opportunities to exchange ideas. And there are a few different topics that we are pursuing right now. One is some folks have expressed interest in having generic chains for situation models, looking at what are the common climate threats and the biophysical effects of those threats for each ecosystem. So for example, for coral reefs, that ocean acidification is a common threat, and what are the effects of that? How does it affect coral reefs? So that as they're developing situation models, they could look at those and sort of plug and play. There's also interest in learning more about climate resilient strategies. Once you've incorporated climate into your situation model, it can be a little bit intimidating, and you can sort of think, oh, wow, this is a huge problem. What can I do about it? And so we need to learn more about those strategies. We have a colleague who has been working in the South Caucasus region Central Asia, and so is interested in sharing his work. And we also have a colleague who, it turns out, we just discovered this recently, is an expert in gender equity and social inclusion, and has started to look at the overlap between that and climate resilience, and has shared a huge amount of resources with us, and we want to get her to come and speak to our group. So all of that is, those are some of the topics we're pursuing for learning sessions. And then we're also interested in developing some short guidance pieces on topics of interest, and we're still trying to figure out what are the highest priority topics, but some topics that people have expressed interest in include retrofitting climate into current projects or programs, developing generic chains for climate resilient situation models, which I mentioned earlier, and developing generic chains for common climate smart strategies. So next slide. So we will be reaching out to folks as we confirm these different learning sessions, and ways to get involved include coming to our learning sessions, and also, if you're interested, being a part of our core coordination team. So there's a link there to our workspace that has links to our guidance and links to the recordings of the learning sessions that we facilitated last year, as well as some case studies that we worked on last year. So reach out to us if you are interested in contributing, particularly if you have some experience and would like to present your work to our group, and just come to our sessions if you're just interested in learning and benefiting from what we're doing. And I think that is it for us.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Marcia. We've got Jess up next to talk about nature-based solutions, and then we've got a long one after that.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica Nias from TRMR. So this is the nature-based solutions initiative. We've got two things that we're going to be doing this year. So that's the community of practice, and also we're going to be expanding on the cooperative learning that we did last year. So the new goal is to see how it's being applied across sectors. There's a lot of emerging issues with the development sector, infrastructure, and see if we can find some links with the conservation standards and maybe put together some guidance for that. Next slide. All right, so that's TRMR, this is us. We also have project partner environmental incentives. We are a very small little NGO. We just recently joined CMP. Next slide. In terms of the CMP plan, we are contributing to the collaborative learning. Next slide. All right, so this is the kind of the key thing for today. I want to kind of let everyone know that we're planning our first meeting for the community of practice. What we want to do is provide an opportunity for collaborative and constructive dialogue on nature-based solutions. Everyone has an opinion. There's a lot of emerging kind of ideas and hot topics. So we really want to find out what are the most important topics to explore. Obviously, we have some things that came out of our research from last year. The first one's going to be in July. If you want to see our report, we've got the link to our workspace right there. Okay, next slide, thanks. And then just a bit of description on the report we'll be producing, plus maybe some other products. So what we're going to be doing is looking at emerging NBS activity from other sectors, so development, infrastructure, financial services and insurance. A lot of new players and a crossover between development and conservation activity. And we're going to be following some NBS projects of various scales, looking at lessons learned. Obviously, there's a lot of new lessons learned and a lot of economic efficiency lessons coming out of that. And opportunities for alignment with the conservation standards, a really important one. We're going to be conducting some interviews. So if anyone is an NBS practitioner, or they have someone in mind that is having success or failures with using NBS standard, we're really interested to hear from you. And we're going to be doing a final report of the products and guidance, and hopefully some kind of webinars, depending on what the emerging topics are that come out of the community of practice meetings. So the register to join the community of practice link is right there. If you would like to just put your name in and your email, we are hoping for July 11 or 12, so to be confirmed. And also, if you want to just put in the comments, what is your most important area of concern related to nature-based solutions. We're going to put the terms of reference up on our workspace. We're going to be having 3 of these meetings, and yeah, we hope you really want to get involved with the community of practice. We'd love to meet you. And that's everything. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jessica. So we've got one more, and like I said, this is a longer one. So Sheila and Claire, and you've all got 15 minutes, it looks like. So I'll give you a warning at 10 minutes in, if that's okay. And then
thanks. I'm so sorry, it's me again. So the Conservation Standards Effectiveness and Impact Learning Initiative was launched in last year, 2021. And we are essentially continuing our efforts to build an evidence base for the application of the conservation standards and other adaptive management frameworks used in conservation. So this year, we are focusing on identifying tools, indicators, methods that might help CMP and the broader conservation standards community to monitor the effectiveness of conservation standards adoption. So as you can see here, our team is currently under construction. Sheila and I are leading this initiative, and we'd really like to encourage anyone interested in joining our working group to sign up. We've got a little Google sheet, which oh, thanks, it's already in the chat, fantastic. So this initiative aligns with CMP strategy for goal 1, which is to improve projects and programs. We are aiming to test the assumption that if organizations adopt good conservation practice, then this will lead to enhanced conservation effectiveness and impact. And although this slide depicts CMP's strategic plan, the same inquiry could be asked of any adaptive management framework used in conservation. So last year, what we did is we developed this sort of expansion of that assumption, identifying those key groups of results we would be expecting to see through the achievement, or we would expecting to be achieved through the adoption of an adaptive management framework. And these results might include improvements in the use of evidence, better project planning, better efficiency of implementation, increased project support, increased accountability, transparency, a number of these things, some of them, not all of them necessarily, but ideally a combination of some of these results, and essentially more effective projects, which ultimately leads to enhanced conservation impact. So we spent some of our time last year investigating what evidence there is that supports these assumptions, and predictably, we found that there actually is very little documented empirical evidence that the use of the conservation standards does lead to more effective and more impactful projects. Next slide, thanks. So to build up this evidence base, this year we're aiming to develop tools and resources to support teams to monitor the effectiveness of their conservation projects or their conservation practice as well. So we're going to be creating this conservation effectiveness workbook, which will include indicators and tools and methods and processes. And with sort of support and lessons learned from real world case studies, we're going to be testing and refining potential monitoring protocols that CMP organizations can use to measure change in project effectiveness, and then hopefully embed these into organizational systems and processes. It doesn't have to be CMP organizations, it could be other teams adopting a framework similar to this as well. So finally, we'd ideally as well like to update and create a simplified and accessible evidence base for conservation practice. So next slide, please. To get us started, we've developed a bit of a survey, which we'd really like you to fill out now, which is why we've asked for a little bit of extra time. So we really want to hear from you to find out what tools or methods your organizations might already be using to monitor the effectiveness of your conservation practice. So the link, I think, is in the chat, and I'll just, firstly, the survey is absolutely anonymous, so don't worry too much about implicating your organization in any way. I'll just read through the questions for you. So, is your organization a member of CMP? First question, super quick answer. Is your organization or project using the conservation standards or an equivalent framework? Okay, also yes, no answer, super quick. And then depending on what you answer to those questions, you might move on to section 2, which is the use of systems and tools. So we've asked, does your organization or project currently have systems in place to monitor progress or effectiveness of applying the conservation standards? So ideally, do you have these built-in systems? Are you using particular tools to help monitor the practice of conservation? So the use of an adaptive management framework and how that's going over time. It doesn't have to be super scientific, the process, even if you're documenting some of this information, that would count to us. And there's a little section down there to allow you to describe this in a little bit more detail so we can gain some insight. And then a super easy question, does your organization currently use the conservation audit tool? If you don't know what that is, you can say, I don't know, but also super quick answer. And then section 3 is a little bit more descriptive. So we've asked, what do you feel is the biggest challenge to monitoring the effectiveness of conservation practice? And you've got an open-ended answer there. And the final question is, are you aware of any tools that monitor progress or effectiveness of conservation practice? And I've provided a couple of examples there for you. So the audit tool is one of them. The capability maturity model is another one. The Cambridge Conservation Forum's project evaluation tool. So there's a number of options there for you, but if you know of any other tools that might be useful in monitoring any of the results that I mentioned along that sort of theory of change, so improved project planning, improved stakeholder engagement, improved use of evidence, or change in any of these things, it would be really useful if you could mention some of those things. So hopefully you are doing that. I'll just finish off the presentation with the last slide. So finally, I'd just like to encourage you to sort of sign up to join us if you'd like to. We have an opening meeting scheduled for later this month. And you can get involved in this initiative in a number of ways. So we've got product collaborators who are going to help us identify or adapt potential tools to incorporate in this effectiveness workbook. We've got case contributors who are going to help us to test the indicators and the tools in their sort of real world projects or programs or organizations. And then this is going to sort of provide feedback to us to help us refine those tools. And if you're just an interested party, you are absolutely welcome to join the conversation, providing your thoughts and insight in any capacity whatsoever. So the link is in the chat to sign up. And oh, importantly, another thing is that there are small stipends available for case contributors. that's pretty much what we wanted to cover, but I know that we do have a little bit of extra time. So if there are any questions, Sheila and I are available to answer those.
We've got about 6 minutes left.
Are there any questions in our slide? Can non-CMP members fill out the survey if they have? Yes, please do fill out the survey, even if you're not a CMP member. If you've used the conservation standards or you've used an equivalent approach, yes, please use it. And the survey is not currently available in other languages, but I can hook you up with a bit of Google Translate. So I'll create separate versions of the survey in Spanish and French if necessary. But great suggestion, Paulina, thanks. Okay, you can have an extra 5 minutes, John, if there's no other questions.
Perfect. That puts us right back on schedule, actually, for the original agenda. That sounds good.
Please.
So yeah, I think moving on next, we were going to move to business and other updates. So people are welcome to stay on if they wish, or to jump off. And the first one was the board vacancy. So Erica was going to give an update on that.
Could I, before we go there, could I just let the translators know they can sign off, and please make me co-host or host, and then we'll continue on. And also just a thank you to anyone from the broader community who joined for the showcase. And as John said, you're welcome to stay on, but we also understand you may not be as interested in business. Okay, back to you, John.